So thank you for participating in today's Finger Lakes Institute and Finger Lakes Prism webinar series. We're fortunate enough to have our project manager for the Starry Stonewort Collaborative, who happens to work at the Finger Lakes Institute at Hobart and William Smith Colleges. You see there on the screen in lovely Geneva, New York, on the shoreline of Seneca Lake, the largest of the Finger Lakes in the Finger Lakes region of New York State. So I guess I'll just hand it right over to David Carr, and he will talk about the Starry Stonewort Collaborative. If you have questions, please post them in the chat box and we will get to them. My name is Hillary Mosier. I will be facilitating this webinar today and I'll be asking questions. So either message me directly or post it in the chat and we'll get to it as soon as we can.
Thank you, Hillary. Good morning, everybody. I think it's still morning, right? 11 o'clock. Glad we've got so many people here. This is amazing. We're up above, almost at 60 participants. We had 88 registered, so thanks for being here. I want to just describe, we're going to cover talking about the collaborative a little bit, about how it's set up, look at just a variety of things we've accomplished over the last couple of years so far. And then I want to do a little thing in the end and do some identification about Starry Stonewort. We've had some inquiries during other meetings and things about some confusion about Starry Stonewort as compared to some native species, which is easily done. So we're going to do some of that. And if I'm going to end with a little video from a collaborator and expert out in Wisconsin, assuming I can get the technology to work properly. And it's a wonderful short 4-minute video, but it's a great description of Starry Stonewort and comparisons to native species. Also, we're going to focus on, as far as the things we've accomplished, we're going to really focus largely on our citizen scientist programs. So very brief, a lot of you know us, excuse me, already. I'm going to go over this real quickly for those who are guests and that aren't guests and haven't worked with us before or seen us, but we're glad you're all here. The Finger Lakes Institute's in Geneva, New York. And we promote environmental research and education about Finger Lakes and surrounding environments. We're at Hobart William Smith Colleges. And we look at a variety of program areas, research, education, outreach, and so on. And then hosted at the Finger Lakes Institute is the Finger Lakes Prism. If you're not from New York State or not familiar with this, it's the Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management. And as the name would imply, we partner with people. We do partner with a wide variety of people from colleges to state agencies, federal agencies, anybody we can to work together to reduce the spread and the impacts of invasive species, and also spread the coordinate education and detection, prevention, all those good things about invasive species. So real quick again, and just going over this quickly, if you're not familiar with it, the prism structure is really neat. There's 8 prisms across New York State. Ours is the Finger Lakes one right there in the middle, if you can see my pointer. And it's we all kind of do our own thing, but at the same time, there's a lot of cooperative work. We come together a couple times a year with meetings or phone calls, and in fact, there's soon next week, I think, or maybe later. Very soon, though, we're having an aquatics Zoom call. So those of us that are working on aquatic invasives are going to chat. So it works really well. It's a neat structure. And then this is just a little bit better close-up of the Finger Lakes region and the Finger Lakes, I shouldn't say Finger Lakes region, the Finger Lakes Prism region, if you will. And then we're going to jump right into the bad news here, right off the top. This is Starry Stonewort, folks. These pictures came from Cuca Lake Outlet in Penn Yan, New York. These pictures down the lower left are a little bit fuzzy maybe, but they're from a harvester. Not this year, but a previous year. And you take my word for it, that's what we're seeing. There's at least 90% Starry Stonewort, and these clumps are easily 90 to 100% Starry. And then you see it as a monoculture down here. So this is a problem, and they're not alone. We have these pictures. Carol is on the call, I know, from Canada. She gave us these pictures, and this is up in the Kawartha Lakes region. excuse me. Up in Canada, this is, I believe, Stony Lake or Stony Pond, and they have a similar problem. This beautiful pond is just choked with this stuff. Here it is here, very thick, and this is a clump here that they pulled out up on a dock, and I'm going to come back to this picture later because it's a great shot. So we have a problem, folks. It's here. And then, and more bad news. We can do all the bad news up front, and then we'll start about, cheering things up a little bit. This is the Great Lakes Basin. If you've never looked at it, it's a huge area. But this is your basin or Great Lakes watershed, if you want to call it that. It's usually called the basin. It's so large. All these red dots, this is where Starry Stonewort has been reported as part of the USGS non-indigenous aquatic species database. This is back from September. Probably if you zoomed into this closer, there'd be more dots. They're on top of each other at this scale. They're hard to see everything. Michigan's got their hands full. Here in New York State, we have our hands full too. We have quite a bit over here. And I just want you to point out, if you're not from New York State, the Finger Lakes Institute's right down here. But if you look a good quarter, I've never really done an area calculation, but a quarter to a third of New York State's in the Great Lakes Basin, and it encompasses the entire Finger Lakes region basin. So that's what, we're into this. It's a problem. It's growing, unfortunately, like most invasives are. So this is our map right here. This is our world for this problem. So come on. So here's what it is a little more closer. We're going to again talk about identification later. Nidolopsis or Nidolopsis obtusa is a scientific name for Starry Stonewort. It's an aquatic macroalgae. If you're not familiar with it, it looks and acts like a vascular plant, but it's not. It's an aquatic algae, which gives it some unique characteristics. It's native to Europe and Asia. And a fun fact that blows people's minds, at least mine, in Northern Europe, it's actually fairly rare and protected. So there's an interesting fact. It came through, like many, unfortunately, aquatic invasives in this part of the world. In the 1970s, it came through the St. Lawrence River, ballast tank water from tankers. It came through the Great Lakes, St. Lawrence River to the Great Lakes. This is an often used picture by Paul Skowinski. He's a great partner out in Wisconsin. He did the video we're going to hope to show at the end. It gives you an idea. We're going to talk about this more, but this is a really great picture of it. It's in with a nickel to give it size. These are the bulbils. They're little reproductive structures that are most often down in the sediment. These are star-shaped. You notice it's usually when you find these, it's all covered in muck and goo from the bottom of the pond or lake, but that's what it looks like. These are my dirty fingernails, so they'll be famous someday. And this is an underwater shot. Scott Brown from Michigan has given us many beautiful underwater shots, which are on our website and things. A little more on it. What are the impacts? The impacts are very similar to many invasive species. Very rapid, very aggressive growth. It likes disturbed areas. It comes and grows and forms virtual monocultures, as you see here. There's a few lily pads up here that are lilies are trying to hang in, but they're just surrounded by starry. When this happens, as many of you know, there's potential harm to environmental systems. Spawning areas. Fish just cannot use these areas. The studies I've heard the experts speak, they really have no use for it at all. They can't hide in it. They can't spawn in it. Things like Eurasian milfoil, which is an aggressive invasive, as well as you're probably familiar, it actually does supply some good cover for fish, which is, I guess, a positive, but this stuff doesn't for the most part. It's almost nothing that will breed in it or anything. Water quality is very interesting. There's some recent studies starting to look at that maybe it actually enhances water quality. There's some studies looking at maybe the Starry Stonewort is a phosphorus sink, phosphorus being a nutrient that causes weeds and algae to grow often, and we've been fighting down here in New York State, at least. We've been working for years and trying to reduce sediment nutrients flowing in from our tributaries in the lakes, and phosphorus is part of it. But there's a potential that, this might be a good thing from that standpoint, but that's still up in the air. Replacing native species, again, it just comes in and pushes out like a lot of invasives do, and makes these huge, giant beds of the stuff with very little competition. Human impacts, you know, dragging your boat through this is not easy. It fouls props, it loads up on your, you know, keels of the boats and stuff. Even if it grows up to the surface of the water, which it can do, it's hard to pull a canoe or kayak through it. Again, fishing, you know, fishing here in many other places is a huge economic driver. And if you can't drag your boat through it or the fish aren't even there, it's a problem. So you got your economic impacts. Thing to take away here today is, you know, I'm saying this, there's a tremendous amount of research going on in Starry Stonewort control and understanding, but there's a surprising amount about it we don't know yet. It is a unique character. It's, again, it's one of a group of macroalgae. We do have some natives here, macroalgae, but there's a lot we don't know about it. And that's part of the problem with understanding how to control it. So what are we doing about it? Here comes, you know, hopefully we're trying to do the good thing here and get off the bad news and start looking, hopefully, at some good news. Finger Lakes Institute, we started the Starry Stonewort Collaborative. We're funded by the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative of the Environmental Protection Agency. Thank you to those folks. It is a Great Lakes Basin-wide program. It's that map I showed before. It's a huge area. So it keeps me up at night, but it's an exciting project, and we're excited about it because we've stretched our wings well beyond the Great Lakes area here. And this is kind of our tagline or our overall goal. We want to enhance the capacity of experts on down, resource managers, stakeholders, citizen scientists, community people, to look at and address Starry Stonewort. We're looking at ecology, outreach, and control. Ecology and control, the first and last one there, those are the domains of the experts for the most part, but we're trying to provide access into those reports and studies they do, and you know, spread the good word about the work that's being done and the understandings of those. Particularly in ecology, there's some great work being done a number of places on it to understand better what makes this thing tick, why it grows, and so on. Control techniques. I guess I lied. The worst piece of bad news is that there's no known long-term controls for Starry Stonewort yet. There's no way to fully eradicate it yet. Possibly hand pulling. If you have a very small area and you do hand pulling very carefully so you don't stir up the sediment too much, don't fragment the plant, which it can grow from fragments. There may be some evidence there that hand pulling, if you find it quickly, as small areas, but really beyond that, there's no control techniques. So best management practices have been a little evasive to us. We're going to try and put something together at the end of this year, I hope, of just some kind of a white paper or something discussing this. And we are, again, trying to point folks that need control to the experts and the reports and studies they've done. Outreach, as I said, we're doing in the middle there. We're doing a lot with that. That's important to us at PRISM and at the Finger Lakes Institute. We do with our community outreach and our citizen science monitoring, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. Briefly, we're structured, again, we're based at the Finger Lakes Institute. We do the management and the facilitation of the collaborative. We have a panel of experts we've chosen that are folks that have studied Starry Stonewort for as much as a decade. And these are great. We've tried to get them from all across the Great Lakes and beyond. Well, one of them, Ken Carroll, is down at the Botanical Gardens in New York. He's an expert in DNA tracking for Starry. So we've got these people that they're like advisors to us. You know, I talk to them routinely, either individually or groups, and questions about how we should proceed, what we should do. Then we've got collaborators. A number of you are collaborators. I think they're on here, if not already citizen scientists, and we got 40 plus of them. They're spread across, and these are folks, again, studying Starry Stonewort. They're in the trenches, I call it. They work for government agencies, non-government organizations, colleges, schools doing research, cooperative extensions, all those kinds of things. And so there are our eyes and ears out there, and they also help us reach down to the citizen scientists. It's a huge basin. The watershed's huge around the Great Lakes. We can't fly around, as fun as that would be, to all locations in the basin. So they help us reach out to the citizen scientists to engage them long distance. So I'm going to start running through some things we've done over the last couple of years, and then again focus on our outreach and citizen scientist work and getting identification. When we first started this, collaborative, we had to get the word out we were here, but also to me, collaboration means sharing of information. So that's what we started doing. We started sharing information about what we knew and pointing people in directions of other, other research that's been going on. We've done a lot of workshops and conferences in the last couple of years, 2.5 years or more. And I just want to point out the little stars are ones we took an active role in. We didn't just sit in presentations, we gave presentations or participated in workshops or whatever it was. And these range from, a 15-minute phone call to a board at a lake association to bigger regional, international conferences like the North American Invasive Species or North American Lakes Management Association. And there's me waving my hands at the audience apparently while I'm presenting. We put up a website. I urge you, if you haven't visited, to go visit. It's in process, or almost done, with a little bit of a facelift. There's a lot of neat stuff here I'm going to talk about. Much of what we've done is you can access through the website, so I'm going to talk about it. starrystonewort.org. It's easy to remember. One of the things we're excited about is a library. We had our web developer put a kind of custom library up there, and we're always trying to populate it with posters, research, fact sheets, you name it, anything you get a hold of. There's a bunch of links to videos of webinars and instructional videos we've done and trainings and things. And anybody can submit to it. There's a submission thing, and I get an alert that it gets submitted. We do a quick review and post it. So if you got information of something you've tried in your area, if you did even a local research summary of something you did, let us know and send it up there. We also put up a forum. This is if you've ever tried to repair your car or an appliance or something and gone online to a bunch of enthusiasts for that car or whatever, and you go up and share, you do a little login and you can share some information, some ideas, ask a question. We urge you to do that too. We've unfortunately haven't got as much traction in the forum and library as I'd like, but we're still hopeful it's going to happen. I think they're pretty useful tools. Social media, we had to do social media, and it's very useful. We started with Facebook
yesterday, visiting yesterday.
We got Facebook going, and then this past summer, Mike Caston from our office has been invaluable working with me on this. He put up, we got Twitter, Instagram. He set up a YouTube channel for all our videos. Like Hillary said, this is being recorded. It'll go up there. You can access them directly through the website library, or if you want to try and find them by just searching YouTube, you can. And then we also, Constant Contact is, if you haven't used it, there's also one called MailChimp that's a lot of nonprofits use. It's a mass email, group emailing tool. You can send out really nice looking newsletters and e-flyers and things. And we've built our contact base up to well over 300. We're at 330 plus now. So when we send out something about what we've done or what's happening in the Great Lakes Basin, it goes to that many people. So we're excited about that. If you go onto the website to the contacts page and fill in your information, that helps us populate that list, and you'll be on the list and start getting newsletters and things. We did a story map. I don't know if you've seen these. They're gaining popularity quickly. They're part of the ArcGIS group of tools. It's a geospatially driven, meaning it's mapped to the world of maps and information coming together. This is right off the front page of our website too now. But there's a bunch of activities and locations that are highlighted there for the collaborative. Mike, again, in our office, did a fantastic job. There's a whole section about what Starry Stonewort is, why it's a problem, a variety of things up there. And you kind of go through it, and it's kind of like an interactive website, and you kind of go through and you click on things. There's also a section on comparing lookalikes to Starry Stonewort, trying to identify them. So that's up now. Mike also in our office worked hard, and I worked a little bit on it, but he did most of the work. We did an informal literature review, and what we did here was we took, I think we took 21 easily accessible professional research papers and things. Mike read through them, and he did little quick summaries of them all, and then he put them into a tool called Zotero. I'll talk about in a moment. But the idea was to make maybe just another way to get some of these professional papers more accessible to community level people and volunteers. Like I said, he reviewed 21 documents and papers. There's two things up on our website library. One is the summary he did. He kind of summarized each one, pointed out some of the knowledge gaps and trends. By knowledge gaps, we mean, there's places that more research needs to be done, and these papers reflect that. The papers are fantastic, but they point out things like, okay, we figured this out, we need to figure out more. And then trends, where the researchers agree, and what is clearly something we've learned across the board. And then he also, as I said, he put it in Zotero, which is an interesting tool. You'll see it up there on the website. It gives a quick summary, keywords, full citation for papers and documents. And it makes it sortable and for us, but also shareable to the world as we did. I will note that we do not supply the actual papers. Many of the professional papers, you should go through the proper channels to do that, which a lot of them are online. Many of them are free, but sometimes you got to register or ask permission. Some of them you have to pay a fee, but the full citations are there. So if you do want to find them, you can use the citations to go find those papers. We've done a bunch of webinars. This first one, Collaborative Overview, I did way back when I first started about 2.5 years ago. And then we also had one by Dan Larkin and his crew and Paul Skowinski and his group. They have a once-a-year program this is in Minnesota and Wisconsin. It's called Starry Trek, and in Minnesota in the AIS Snapshot Program, Aquatic Invasive Species Snapshot Program. They have probably 20 locations across each state, so say 40-ish locations. And one day in August, they all come together. Volunteers go out and they have people stationed all around the state, and they train people to identify Starry Stonewort and other invasives. And then they go out and do a little quick, some quick surveys and samples and come back and discuss it. It's a really cool program that we're hoping we can maybe do a little expanding this year, maybe here in New York State, and there's some interest in Indiana. Then we had 4 presentations this past summer. Many of you were on those. We had Brian Ginn from Lake Simcoe up in Lake Ontario, Michelle Nault from Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, again, Wes Glisson and Dan Larkin again from Minnesota, Aquatic Invasive Species Center, and then Blake Cahill, who's working on his doctorate at Central Michigan University. These are great presentations. They're all available on our website in recorded form. Parentheses numbers are who we had attending. So we had some pretty good attendance on these and a lot of really great questions. Okay, this is the near and dear to our hearts at the Finger Lakes Institute and Finger Lakes Prism. This is getting down again to the citizen scientists and volunteer work we work with, and I want to go over our program and then discuss some of the data that was collected in 2020. So, why do we do this? A lot of you, I think, have been involved, if not our program, other programs. Citizen scientist education involvement. It's just so important to get people out there doing this. These are not what I would call scientific surveys. They're not like a 100-point grid going out and doing every 100 feet or 100 yards or whatever it is that you lay out. And but the data that's collected is excellent. I'm completely pleasantly surprised and amazed how good the data is that citizen scientists are collecting. It's overall, it's excellent. And it's helpful. There's a lot of ground to cover. So even though it's more, I guess, ad hoc than a scientific survey you might get from a university, we cover a lot of ground, and you'll see that when we show the data in a minute. We talk about identification and early detection. That's what it's all about. In the invasive species world, early detection and rapid response is a buzz phrase we use. But if you find something when it's small, like a small thing of a small patch of Starry Stonewort, you can maybe go out and do some hand pulling and stop it in its tracks. Hydrilla, you hear about Hydrilla a lot. That's a problem. It's such an aggressive one now. That's number one right now in the state, New York State, looking to find that. If you find a little bit of it, you can maybe quickly run and do some kind of chemical treatment or something before it spreads. So early identification and rapid identification and early detection is critical. So we asked people to look for Starry Stonewort and up to 2 other priorities. This year we did Starry Stonewort and Hydrilla, and water chestnut. We asked them if they're interested. Everybody, if you want to identify more, go for it. Both invasive and native. We provide lots of resources to do that, fact sheets, field guides, all these things. And a large bunch of people, they chose to identify a lot of different things. Because when you do a rake toss in some areas, you're going to pull up several different species of plants, and people are really doing a great job identifying that stuff for us. And again, the whole reason we do this is involvement. The premise and the importance here is to empower individuals in understanding the importance of conservation efforts in invasive species and why invasive species are a problem and why we need to stay on top of it. Uh-oh. Oh, hang on. Okay, sorry folks. Rake toss. I just want to go quickly. If you don't know, because I used the term, if you haven't done one or don't know what a rake toss survey is, it's as the pictures are here. You take a lower right corner there. You take two landscape rakes, cut the handles off at about a foot long, and zip tie them together, and then attach a long rope. That's your tool for the field, and these are used by scientists all the way down to community level folks. You throw it out holding on to the end of the rope. There's been plenty of us that have lost them. And you throw it out, let it sink, and draw it back at a nice steady pace, and then see what you've brought up. You don't have to do it from a boat. These are both pictures of myself in the upper left corner, another fellow on the right, and kayaks. We have a lot of people that do rake tosses from their docks or shorelines, so that's fine too. But that's the primary way when we do these surveys, we find out what's out there. So the training. We did webinar style training. That was planned for outside of New York State because of the distance, but due to COVID, we did that internally in New York State this year as well. Normally we go and visit people and do them live or have them come in and we'll do the trainings locally. But it worked well. This year, we have, the Finger Lakes Prism has had a macrophyte survey program for 4 or 5 years now, 4 years. And so what we did was we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, and we merged with it. So the Starry Stonewort program merged in New York State with the macrophyte survey program. And it worked well. We were able to share some resources and share some software and things, and it just it helped out a lot. So that's what happened in New York State. And a coworker, she left, unfortunately, working at Western New York Prism. She was invaluable, Nicole, if you're on. She's a wonderful person. We're lucky to have her, but she did the presentations, a couple different trainings for New York State. And then I did them for a group in Indiana. This is the Lilly Center for Lakes and Streams at Grace College, was our collaborator out there. We did some presentations, training for the Nature Conservancy and Ducks Unlimited. They're the office located in kind of the northeast corner of Lake Ontario up in Canada. And then the Kawartha Lakes region, folks, up in Lake Ontario. And I gotta say, this group, these other ones are as the model. The model we set up was we talked to collaborators. They reach out for us and contact folks that are interested at the community level. This down here at Kawartha Lakes, this was driven largely by Carol, who was on the call. This is just a really amazing group of concerned citizens that jumped all over this and really ran with it and did some very important sampling where they are, and I'll describe that in a minute. So what do we do? Training. We talk a lot. We do. I give like an hour training with lots of slides. We do a lot on very good pictures and the best pictures and slides we can for identifying invasives, particularly starry in my case. Training materials. We send out what we call kits, these field kits, and we send out a rake and something to put it in, and a bin. A little white bin to sort what you brought up on your rake. We include training materials in some more like field information in these kits we went up. We do provide training materials. Usually, if we're in person, we hand them out. But in this case, we put a lot of digital versions of training materials online where people can access them because of COVID and the long distance for out of state. That's the best way to do it. So we give out a bunch of these kits, and we can't unfortunately supply one to everybody, but we send them out for people to share by association or whatever the group is that's doing it. Again, we supply lots of resources online. In the training, I give you know, some citations for books. If you really want to get into it, you can go out. There's books and field guides that if we didn't supply the field guide, there's ones out there, and there's textbooks on this. So we provide as many resources as possible. And then when you're identifying species out there, there's no point doing it unless you're going to report what you found. So our reporting, we ask that people use their own smartphone and tablet. We're trying to get away from paper because paper smudges and it's hard to read and gets wet and all that. And we're using Survey 123, and I'm going to talk about just a minute. And we've had some pretty good results here. Survey 123 is a free app for smartphones and tablets, but we at the Finger Lakes Institute, with the help of the backing of Hobart William Smith, we would develop a form specifically for the project. So this is one really good example we shared with the Macrophyte Survey in New York State. So we're all using the same form. We had a little glitch this year, but we got around it. It had to do with installing it, but we sent out a workaround that worked for the most part, and people took really good data with this tool. Why are we doing this? In New York State, we have IMAP invasives, which is a fantastic tool. These IMAP invasives folks work closely with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation and Natural Heritage people. Great program, great software, but it's geared for New York State and Pennsylvania. And we're outside, way outside. You know, I go out, as you saw that first map, out over to Minnesota, way up in Canada. So I wanted something that would cover all the bases. Other states have their own versions of handheld tools. EDD Maps, you may have heard of, is another big platform out in the upper Midwest in Canada. All have these beautiful, they're all good products. They're these digital, you know, things that work on phones and tablets. We wanted something that we could really control as we learn how to do this. So it's quick and easy to record, you know, information, locations, and sample information, what you found. It uploads to the cloud almost immediately, where we can look at it, review it, we can export and share it, and so on. There's a live map. Again, another plug for my website. There's a live map on the website. So when people upload their data, a little point comes up on the website of where they've been sampling, surveying. And we're working with USGS NAS. We upload the data to them, and of course, IMAP invasives in New York State we do. We talk with IMAP invasives folks regularly. We talk to them quite often, and we keep brainstorming about ways to make this work, you know, more and more smoothly between the two platforms and things, and where one starts and one stops and all that. So they got great programs to do good things with them. And real quick, this is what the form we came up with looks like. These are just screen grabs from probably my phone. You know, it's kind of trying to keep it as simple as possible. Fill in some information. You find your point on the map, lower left here.
Yeah, I also sent her a message.
Rate toss. You do, you know, what did you find? You know, how much did you find? Density, and then again, we encourage identifying as much as you can. The blue is natives, the reds are invasives. And then you make some notes, add photos, and so on. It's pretty straightforward and works really well. This is real quick a snapshot of the Kawartha Lakes region up in Canada. I zoomed in on the tool on the website just to show you what it looks like. These are just points where people have tossed rakes and taken data. This is not showing locations of confirmed starry or invasives. It just shows what they did. If you click on the point, it gives you the information they loaded into the Survey 123 form. But it's kind of neat because you can pan and zoom around and see where you or others have worked and where rake tosses have been done and so on. Now the good stuff. How am I doing on time? Okay, we're good. I want to talk about what we did, or what you did, the citizen scientists did for this past summer, going out and surveying. We got 447 rake tosses. And these numbers, I think, are right. Finally, it was amazing pouring through these different spreadsheets and stuff to get the numbers right, but they're real close. 447 rake tosses. We had 40 different people from 15 different organizations and 37 water bodies. And these numbers are spread across Here's our New York State, and again, we merged with an existing program, the Macrophyte Survey, so we have a real nice base here already with lots of repeat customers, so to speak, that come back and help us survey every year. A lot of folks down here. This is the Kawartha Lakes region up here. This is Lake Simcoe, very large lake. To be perfectly honest, the gentleman that took these points for us is not a citizen scientist. He's a limnologist who works for the Lake Simcoe organization, but he's very nicely. Brian Ginn, he's very helpful, answers lots of questions, took some points for us. And down here in the lower left, you can see this, 2 little lakes down here in Indiana. You know, we say, well, we only did a couple lakes, but it was good. I'm not talking about that more. Aside from we got them out there doing this, our collaborator at the Lilly Center for Lakes and Streams said the program really helped her build relationships with folks out there and for lake associations, and that's as important as anything. That was interesting. That's as important as anything for the collaborative to build those relationships. So she said it was very useful, and hopefully we're going to work with them again this summer. What do the participation numbers look like? First, and I've got divided between in this whole, I'm going to go through some slides, the Finger Lakes region and then everybody else, because we've got such a base in the Finger Lakes region. It's just easier to do it that way for now. The 4 years we've done this in our region, 2017 to 2020. We had a little bit of drop off this year with participants, but man, they did a lot of work. Like if you're on the call, you did a fantastic job, great work. 31 volunteers sampled and took surveys in 28 water bodies. They did 372 rake tosses over 4 months. In addition, we set our, this year we set our Watercraft Stewards, another program we have. We set up with college students mostly at the boat launches across the region to educate people about cleaning a clean, drain, and dry their boat. You know, don't go between lakes with invasive species hanging off your trailer or boat and so on. So while they were there in downtimes, we had 15 stewards do rake tosses as well. So they did another 70 rake tosses. Now outside New York, we had 9 volunteers on 9 separate water bodies, 75 rake tosses over 4 months as well. And again, this is spread between Canada and Indiana. Great work though. I mean, really collected, 75 rake tosses is not small potatoes there. It's a lot of good work. So we're very happy with that. By water body, I'm not going to go through all these. This is again the Finger Lakes region first. We did all these lakes and ponds. You can see generally there's 1 to 3 volunteers for each lake. Some standouts. Kinesis Lake is not a huge lake, but boy, they had a lot of activity, which is just wonderful to see. And Seneca Lake is a very large lake, and we also had 6 there. So just wonderful to see this spread all over the region. And a lot of smaller lakes, not just the big, Finger Lakes. There's a lot of smaller lakes and stuff in here, which is just neat to see. And then down here in the lower right, this is the work that our own people did at these different lakes. Same kind of information for outside New York State. In orange at the top here, Lake Maxinkuckee, which I just love the name of that lake. This is in Indiana. I went to the website and it's just a beautiful lake. I mean, the photos up there are just gorgeous. They had a volunteer there and they had a volunteer on Silver Lake. They did great work, and I'm going to talk about particularly Lake Maxinkuckee here in a minute. These lakes down here, these are all in the Kawartha Lakes region. We've got 6 there. I said we had 9 volunteers on 9 lakes. Well, that's, people didn't just do, it wasn't 1 person per lake. We had people doing multiple lakes and things, which is wonderful. And then Lake Simcoe, again, I mentioned that's that big roundish lake kind of west of these. That was Brian Ginn, the limnologist, and he did some sampling there for us. Back to the Finger Lakes again, how many groups? Well, there was 9 groups, 9 lake associations and water, conservation districts and things that did sampling for us. I know this map's really hard to see. But you might see the points at least if you can't make out the colors about the spread across the region. We covered, it looks like we covered practically every lake, which isn't true, but it looks that way. So we had 9 lake associations or other organizations. A few volunteers are just out there doing it, not belonging to an association, and then our own Finger Lakes staff. We had 15 people doing stuff. And then a similar up in Canada. This is the way it looks in Canada. I'm a tad unclear on some of the Lake Association names, because it's the Watercraft Lake Stewards, which kind of covers a big group of lakes, and then but there's the Jack Lake group, and then there's Lake Simcoe region, and then the Stony Lake group. I'll have to talk to Carol at some time at length, but a lot of these have their own individual lake associations, and then there's a kind of overall Watercraft Lake Stewards as well. But you can see where they you know, we had at least 4, maybe 5 or more groups or associations up there doing this. And then down in Indiana, this is Chicago over here, if you're not familiar with the region, Chicago, and I think this is Fort Wayne over here on the right. Lake Maxinkuckee Environmental Council, and then the Silver Lake Conservation Foundation did these 2. And so thanks to them, they did great work. How did it break down here? We've got very briefly, this is just there's a million different ways to cut all this data, and we just don't have time to show it all. But in New York State, we came up with 48% of the rake tosses gave us invasive species, and 52% gave us natives, or no invasive species found, I should say. That's a better way to put it. Is this good or bad news? It doesn't look great to me, because we're, you know, based on these rake tosses, we're basically half and half invasives or not. What is neat, you know, is that this starts to get at people, although it, you know, it's more whether invasive species are found or not. It also gets at, and if I could have time to show you all the data, how good people are getting and working hard to learn how to identify natives as well. We can see, because you both get this, we get lists back that are loaded into the tool, the Survey 123 tool, and see invasives and natives identified correctly in most cases, which is really neat. And similar, I kind of squoze in everything up here. So Canada upper right and down to Indiana lower left. Similar ratios, half and half, invasive species found or not. So, you know, this is a lead off for both these groups. I will say that, you know, up in Canada, a lot of that stuff is the first time that's ever been reported. So, you know, it's I'm going to talk a little bit more of that here, but it's tough when you just started jumping in. There's a lot out there that we're just reporting for the first time, so that's good. Positive outcomes. It's never positive when you find Starry Stonewort or any other invasive. But I can explain, you know, I talked earlier about early detection, rapid response, how important that is. When you find something, we report it so we know what we're dealing with, we can find it, and maybe if we're lucky, we can come out and start treating it somehow. So back to this map again. New York State on the right, we got Canada on top, at the little, see those 2 little blue dots on the lower left, Indiana. So again, this is not good news, but it's important. We found 5 new locations of Starry Stonewort in our region, and unfortunately, they in bold there, Long Pond, Balsam Pond, Skinny Atlas Lake, and Kinesis Lake. Those are new locations in those lakes, so like that hadn't been found in those lakes before. So it's spreading, which isn't good. But you know, try and be positive about this. We found it, we mapped it, so now we know what we're dealing with. Canada, lots happening up there. Up in Big Cedar Lake, a gentleman reported to me he had like 3 or 4 small areas that they were able to do some hand pulling, and then followed up with benthic mats. It's kind of experimental, but he says that it really was great to find, because he was able to control it spread further than it had. So that was a really positive thing to hear. And then there were all kinds of new identifications, expanded beds through the Watercraft Lakes region, particularly in Stony, Buckhorn, and Jack. Not limited to those, but they were big ones that had a lot of identifications. And so they came up with 23 newly identified or reported locations total, which isn't good news, you know. But I'm not going to comment on the province of Ontario or anything, but it's been reported to me from folks in Canada that Starry Stonewort and other invasives are not really on the front burner up there, and they really need to get folks recognizing that this is a serious problem, and this is the first step toward that. I've spoken with the contact for EDD maps up in Ontario, and I'm going to send him all the data, so at least it'll be up in that system for the first time. And then down here, Lake Maxinkuckee, they went out and they found what they thought was a new spot of Starry Stonewort, and then they went out with their Department of Natural Resources, and they did one of those professional, you know, 100-point surveys. and I guess 17 of the points of Starry Stonewort, and they then they realized they were able to determine through that process that it wasn't new. This was an expanded bed of one they already knew about. Not good news, but again, they get a better handle of understanding what's happening out there. And the last I knew, the association was turning to the chemical application folks in that region to see what they could do to try and knock it down for the following season. So not great news, but it's good because finding things and trying to take action as quickly as we can. That's it for that presentation. I want to get into identification and start Stonework quickly. We don't have a lot of time left. Hillary, I want to know if we got time for a question or two, or you want to just move forward.
Yeah, why don't we do a little identification and then we'll have a discussion. There's a lot of discussion going on in the thread right now. That would be
Good.
Nice to bring
Good.
to the entire presentation.
Okay, great. I'm going to go through these relatively quick because, again, I really do want to play this video because Paul Skowinski did such a good job on it. Okay, Starry Stonewort, again, macroalgae. This is a close-up picture of a bulbil. Again, these little reproductive structures. They're not seeds, they're little things down in the sediment. They're star-shaped. If you see one of these, you got it. You're done. It's Starry Stonewort. Other similar native algae, macroalgae, produce bulbils, but they're usually round. They have little tiny white balls. It's very long and stocky. We're going to call this, for sake of argument, as a stem, but in reality, these are cells. Again, this is a macroalgae. It's not a vascular plant. Talk about that more here. Okay, it grows in depths up to 9 meters. That's pretty deep. Usually it's in more shallow, but it's, you know, slow-moving water, lakes, ponds, slow-moving rivers and streams. It has rhizoids. It does not have roots. It's a macroalgae, so it's anchored to its sediment via rhizoids, which are these clear. They look, if you can see, you can't see this picture. It's a little hard to see, but they're these, and I got other pictures and things, but they're clear, look like monofilament fishing line. And this picture over on the right here is wonderful. On the penny, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 star-shaped bulbils on the penny connected by the rhizoids. So again, if you're able to find this, you're pretty much done. You know it's Starry Stonewort. Can grow up to 2 meters long. It can get quite long and large, and that's another identifier compared to some of the others, lookalikes, natives. It has whorls, what we call whorls of blunt branchlets around the stem. It's not really a stem, but we're calling it that. If you can see up here, and I got more pictures. This, on this kayak, see it's long, stocky kind of plant when you pull it out in single ones. Also, sometimes you can see these little tiny orange antheridium. They're little structures that grow in the right where the whorls attached to the stem. You don't always see those though, and if you do see this tiny star-shaped ones, that's a better way to identify it. Here's some more, you know, kind of laboratory-like looks at it, but this is what they call an internodal cell. The cells in macroalgae are some of the biggest in nature, I understand. So, you know, you got this long thing in between, and you got this what we call whorl of 5 to 7 branchlets around. And then if you're underwater, this is kind of a shot. If you're underwater, I happen to see 1 or 2 growing. This is what they look like. I want to mention too, as a macroalgae, if you squeeze that stem, it will pop. And that's another way to get close to, you know, get a closer idea of what you're looking at. And if it smells funny, if it smells like musky or garlicky smell, almost like skunk, those likely a native muskgrass and not Starry Stonewort. So if you squeeze it and pop it and it smells, it's not Starry Stonewort. And I found that to be a fairly good way to identify. Here's a picture that Carol sent us. I brought it up again in a little bit bigger because it shows really well this this clear fishing line kind of rhizoids with its star-shaped bulbils all along it. This is a really clean clump. I don't know if Carol, if you cheated and washed this off, but it usually when I've done it, it's just a handful of sediment and muck in here. But this is a really good picture to show what it looks like. This looks like it's probably 100% starry. And again, over here, unfortunately, the beautiful lake up there just choked with this stuff. So with that, cross your fingers, folks. I'm going to try and do this. Okay, this is actually our website. And this is, I'm accessing it through the library, but I'm going to play this video right now. Again, look, this is Paul Skowinski from Wisconsin. He's one of our expert panelists. He's an expert on all things aquatic invasives. Look at his pictures. Look at when he talks to, pay attention to smiley faces, because you use smiley and frowny faces to identify invasives versus natives, but it's very effective. It works well.
Starry stonewort is a species of macroalgae related to many native species in Wisconsin. This species can be challenging to identify, but learning a few important features will help you distinguish starry stonewort from its relatives. These algae have a simple body plan consisting of a main axis, which you could consider the stem. For simplicity's sake, we will just use the word stem in this video. Around the stem are whorls of branchlets, much like the whorls of leaves you would see on other aquatic plants. A key feature of starry stonewort, and probably the easiest to look for, is the presence of star-shaped bulbils. These are produced on clear threads in the sediment, which look like fishing line. A small number of native species will produce bulbils too, but these are generally round like tiny snowballs. Starry stonewort bulbils have many points or lobes. Starry stonewort is very large compared to most other macroalgae in our region. Notice the size of these native species compared to the nickel in each photograph. Then look at the starry stonewort. It is several times larger in diameter than most of our native species. Starry stonewort produces small orange balls along its branchlets. These are the male reproductive structures called antheridia. So far, only male starry stonewort has been observed in North America. This means that there is no sexual reproduction occurring, and therefore no viable seeds are being produced. Without females present, starry stonewort can only spread by bulbils and fragments of itself. Starry stonewort is likely to be confused with several native species. The most commonly confused species are the muskgrasses, also called chara. However, all of the common chara species have long cells running up and down the stem, creating a rough or textured feel. The stem of starry stonewort is smooth. Species of Nitella can also look very similar to starry stonewort. The branchlets of Nitella always fork at the ends, producing 2 or more equal length parts. The branchlets of starry stonewort may appear to fork, but what you see is actually a long bract coming out of the branchlet. Since these bracts are often only on the upper branchlets, you can look further down the stem where the branchlets don't have any forks or bracts. When starry stonewort is removed from the water, its stiff branchlets tend to remain in the same position. Species of Nitella tend to be very relaxed and droopy when they are out of water. Sago pondweed is a common native species that can look somewhat like starry stonewort. However, notice that its leaves alternate left and right on the stem rather than being in whorls. It also produces many large seeds on long stalks above the plant, which starry stonewort would never do. Horned pondweed has opposite or whorled leaves, but will never produce bulbils, and the leaves are very weak and delicate. It produces many clusters of 4 banana-shaped seeds along the stem, which it typically holds throughout most of the growing season. Remember, without females present, starry stonewort can only spread by bulbils and fragments of itself. Boat trailers, anchors, and other recreational equipment are the most likely vectors for spreading starry stonewort. Monitoring boat landings is a smart strategy for detecting an introduction of starry stonewort and slowing its spread. For help identifying starry stonewort and other aquatic plants of your lake, check out the field guides and other helpful resources.
Okay, that's the little short movie. Again, this is easily accessible on our YouTube channel, or go through the website is probably a quicker and easier way to get to it. And that's really all I have. I know I went through a lot of stuff, but we're pretty excited about where the collaborative is going at this point. It's got a lot of interest and momentum at this point. We've done some great work. Our again, citizen scientists are doing outstanding work. So I guess questions, Hillary.
Great, Dave, that was wonderful. There's been a lot of dialogue in the chat box, but I did want to point and ask Debbie Palmer, who is out of Indiana, I am assuming. She indicated that they are using a wait and see approach for their Starry Stonewort management, and I wondered if she could just elaborate on that
Yes.
management strategy.
Yes.
Yeah,
Can you hear
wonderful. Yep, thank you so
Okay.
much.
So yeah, I'm at Lake Maxinkuckee, and after attending a webinar, I went right out and threw a rake, and my first rake that I pulled in, there was Starry. So that was really disappointing. So I panicked immediately and so started talking to people in our area. And so I talked to DNR, and then I talked to a chemical applicator, and the DNR recommended that since it wasn't causing us any problems, that we were not seeing it in the shallow areas, that we were seeing most of the most density was actually in the very deep areas, that if we tried to do some kind of chemical application, he was concerned that using a nuclear bomb option, high concentration of a broad spectrum herbicide would kill everything, and then something else was going to come in and fill that void. And he was concerned that we were going to create another problem for us, or create a different problem when Starry wasn't really causing us a problem. So his recommendation was, don't spray anything, let's monitor it for a while, which makes me very nervous, because everything that I'm hearing is rapid response.
Yeah.
And DNR is saying, whoa, low, let's put the brakes on it.
Okay. Well, Debbie, thanks for being here. I recognize your name, and we've exchanged emails and things. Boy, a lot here, and I'm not an expert, but I'll tell you what I do know from the experts. In one hand, Michelle Null from Wisconsin, she's with the Department of Natural Resources of Wisconsin. She has given presentations. I think we have a version of it up on our website and YouTube. And they looked at a number of different lakes, at how to control it, and trying different methods in different lakes, very scientifically and so on. And then there's one lake, though, they left alone, and even though they've left alone, the Starry Stonewort has not grown much in that lake, or even reduced a little bit on its own. They don't really know why, but that it does happen. At least there, it's happened at one. I'll just throw that out there. Again, I started out early on in the presentation saying this, surprisingly, a lot of information we don't know. We're still learning what is happening here. As far as the chemical treatment, I'm not in that world. I know the chemical treatments are getting better and better as far as being targeted to species. I can't, based on what I've heard and people I've talked to, if you do a chemical treatment, it's not necessarily going to kill everything. But again, I'm not a chemical person, and we got to remember, we're talking about herbicides and algicides, and there is a difference, and I couldn't really tell you what they are. I know most of them that they try on Starry are copper-based, for whatever that's worth. There's a small lake near us down here that did some application this summer, and I was out in the boat, in a boat right before they did the application, and there were other species there, and they're concerned about it. So I guess you got to turn to the experts, because I can't answer that. I just know from what I've heard that it doesn't necessarily kill everything if you're doing it properly and carefully. The other thing I'll throw out there is, again, I've heard the chemical treatment will not kill Starry Stonewort, and not yet anyway. They haven't figured that out yet. There's no long-term control methods. It won't eradicate it. It will knock it down for sure. But there's no, I've seen studies where they've taken little tiny ponds and really, purposely, they've done some major chemical treatments and stuff to try and kill it. And it's just about eradicated it, but that's over really applying too much over several summers. And it was, a research kind of science project. So for whatever that's worth too, you're not going to kill it if you do the chemical application. But it will slow it down and knock it down, at least for the season. As far as rapid response, you did rapid response. I mean, I know the results are not what you wanted, and you're nervous about what your DNR is saying, and I can't speak to that. But, you know, the fact that you went out there, you found it your first rake toss, you ended up out there DNR somehow, and you found it, and you know, got a better handle of what's there, and then you went right away and talked to the chemical treatment place. You did the best you could do. I mean, that's textbook about early detection rapid response. I mean, you did a great job. I know it's not where you wanted to be, but it's as good as you can get as far as how you handled it. I would continue to push gently for more information about, you know, I don't know if if you're able to talk to some of the chemical treatment experts out that way and ask them about just what the DNR is worried about. You know, ask them if, you know, you have to kill too many other species or not. Because these folks are good at it. They're in the industry out there to do that. And, you know, most people understand they don't want to kill everything in the lake. So I would, if you can, I would talk to more chemical people and see what they say about it.
And one thing that I was also told was that it likes a mucky substrate and likes still water, which is not, our lake has a very sandy shoreline and a lot of wave action. So we're thinking perhaps that's keeping it from getting established in the shallower areas where a lot of the boating, where it would impede with boating and fishing.
Yeah, it could be. You know, again, it's one of those areas we've recognized in our office that more research needs to be done about sediment and, you know, how Starry, you know, attaches to it. If it, you know, it doesn't, they don't act like roots bring you nutrients, but, you know, why and how do each sediment affect how Starry spreads and so on. So maybe that's the point. I don't know about wave action. But you know, maybe you're onto something there. And the key thing though, you know, in active areas is keep it from fragmenting if you can. You know, you're keeping boats from going through it because it will regenerate from little fragments.
Great, thank you so much, Dave. There are a few other questions in the chat box, so I hope that if you need to go, obviously, please feel free to drop off the call, the webinar. But the remaining questions, we are recording this, so you can come back to it and listen to the questions afterwards. One of the questions was, what does it do for long-term fish populations?
Boy, you know, I don't know the answer to that, but it to me, it's very worrisome because I figure if you got a huge, you know, in some cases, you know, Starry Stonewort populations, you're measuring them in acres. You know, that's a huge, you know, huge areas. And if it's literally driving the fish out and they're not spawning, that doesn't look good for long-term fish populations in my mind. Now, I'm not, you know, I'm not a fisheries person. I'm more of a project manager, but my understanding of what I've heard experts say, you know, to me, it doesn't bode well. Now, I'm not sure. I have to look at our own, you know, our list of publications we've reviewed and things. I don't know if I've seen a report or study on that. But I think it's a valid concern personally, but again, I'm not a fisheries person.
And I'll just add that that is one of the concerns about Starry Stonewort is the limited information to the ecology. There's been very few research articles posted on impact to macroinvertebrates, fish population, and even the absorption of certain nutrients. So, you know, Starry Stonewort Collaborative is trying to delve into those deeper questions and hope to have questions soon. Another question is, what type of management techniques have been proven successful, if any?
As far as eradication, none. Other than, like I said, there's some evidence that hand pulling done very carefully in a small location, you know, very small infestation and over several seasons might take care of it. Mechanical harvesting is done. And then, you know, if you get out there, because Starry Stonewort is a late grower in the season, but a lot of people, even if you're nice fall, you're happily out there trying to fish and so on in September, October. So I know, like I showed pictures right when the one first slides was Seneca Lake outlet here in Penn Yan, New York, and they've harvested every year with a big mechanical harvester, and that knocks it down for the season. Anecdotally, the harvest operator has said that he thinks it's less and less each year. but there's no scientific proof for that as far as, multiple harvesting every year, knocking the population down. So there's mechanical harvesting, there's chemical treatments, that also does a number on it. It doesn't kill it. It keeps coming back. So that works in some areas. Benthic mats are being tried off and on, and there's some positive results from that. But again, more research has been done. And in fact, I heard from somebody, I think it was, darn, I forgot his name. Debbie, maybe I think he's with the Nature Conservancy in Indiana. They tried it. And this was several years ago. And then they left the mats in there, and normal sedimentation occurred on top of the mats. And then Starry started populating the sedimentation on top of the mats. So, matting might work, but you got to maintain them. It's another thing to do. Diver-assisted suction harvesting, which is essentially manual removal, hand pulling, only done with divers and machinery, is probably a pretty good technique as well. That's still being tested, and it's not cheap. It's fairly expensive. There's some of the controls I know.
Great, thank you. What weeks of the year, give or take, are the most likely to be the big puffy pillows of Starry near the surface?
What was the first part of the question?
So when in the season would you likely see those big puffy pillows of Starry Stonewort?
Generally, it varies, but Starry starts growing pretty strongly in July, August. Then we get into late August and into September, you're going to see those pillows. The stuff grows. Once it gets going, it grows. Again, it starts later in the season than many macrophytes, aquatic plants and algae, but it gets going. So you're going to see those big pillows definitely August, September, and they hang around. Depending as our falls seem to getting warmer and longer, they're hanging around in October and even November. But so late summer, early fall.
Great. Another question, I think our last question. Have the embayments along the St. Lawrence River been recently sampled for Starry Stonewort?
Good question. I don't know the answer to that. They should be. I don't know. We could talk to the prism that's up there, our compatriots up there in the Sleelock prism, St. Lawrence Eastern Lake Ontario prism. We could talk to them and ask. I don't know the answer to that. That's a good question. I would think it would be a good thing to do. That's a big river, huge river system. It'd be, if nothing else, interesting to find if it is or isn't, if that has is a contributor as a limiting factor to Starry.
So Will Wegman out of I think Lake Simcoe in Canada indicated that they had really good success with shade mats for water soldier, indicating maybe Starry Stonewort would have a similar effect in management.
Good, sounds great. Yeah, they're doing. I've talked to Brian a number of times, Brian again up there, and he reports in a presentation, just folks to get an idea what the stuff's like. Several years ago, they eradicated Eurasian milfoil, practically eradicated it in the lake. And then within just a very few years, Starry Stonewort filled in all that area. They got rid of one, and then Starry came in, and arguably maybe it's worse if it's not eradicatable. So anyway, it's just one of those war stories that we're all dealing with.
Another question was asking about the pH studies on water columns supporting Metallopsis, indicating some of the Chara and Cariacea seem to be present in particularly hard water. And I know Robin Sleeth did a comparison study of pH. Maybe you can shed some light on that.
I don't know a lot about that. I do know that one of those trends I talked about that my office mate Mike figured out reading some papers is Starry Stonewort loves calcium, and that may be a limiting factor. And that's kind of known across the board now that calcium it's calcium-rich waters. The Great Lakes and northeastern U.S. and into Canada, you look at you got to talk to a hydrogeologist and all that, but we are calcium-rich in our waters up here. I don't know much about pH. We'd have to research, again, read Robin's paper, which, boy, that's probably one of the ones that we reviewed. It's probably in our little review we did. So, it's interesting. You look at calcium and things and pH, why is Starry Stonewort rare and even protected in some parts of Northern Europe? We don't know. Is there water less calcium rich, or is there something else that's happening? So water chemistry is definitely, in my mind, along with sediment, those are two things we really need. We being the global research world, we need to really look at as far as controlling Starry.
Yeah, yeah, I believe Robin Fleece did all of the Northeast area and found that the Adirondacks, being more acidic, had lower populations of Starry Stonewort, and that the Finger Lakes region would be more dominant based on pH. So there's a good thread going on about benthic mats. And so I might invite Will Wegman if he wants to open his mic and talk about the benthic matting that you're using in your area.
Okay, hi everyone. Yeah, so I'm just north of Toronto near Lake Simcoe, and we had a infestation of water soldiers, so a different aquatic invasive plant. I don't think you have any sightings yet in the US. It's from Eurasia. Anyways, it looks like the top of a pineapple plant or aloe vera, and it can spread rapidly. And we found that we used a combination of manual raking as well as using a herbicide in the fall. But for real troublesome areas, especially small new patches, putting down shade mat over top of, right directly over top of these, we sewed in or connected chain to 4 sides of a 10 by 10 sheet, and just deployed it right over top of especially new outcroppings of water soldier, or where there's a lot of woody debris that you can't rake properly, and the plants get up underneath. So for new areas and troublesome areas in very small new application or new sections where it seems to be spreading, it might work.
Thank you, Will. Thank you for being here too. Matting and the shade things are, I think, and again, I'm like this non-scientist here, but I think they show a lot of promise. It seems to be working on small patches that you've seen some positives on water soldier, and I've heard people have trying it on Starry Stonewort. It seems to be working pretty well. One thing about Starry Stonewort are those pesky little bulbils, which are so easy to help identify the plant, but they hide down in the sediment. So, I'm not sure, again, we know completely how long they're viable. So if you cover, if you put down a shade or benthic matting top of Starry Stonewort, I'm not sure how long those little bulbils are viable. So what I'm saying is, I guess if you move the mat, is it going to come back from those bulbils? Probably not long term if you leave the mat down long enough, but it's one of those unknowns. But anyway, I think benthic matting has got a lot of promise, particularly in smaller areas. But again, there's more research to be done.
Yeah.
Will, I think what you
an interesting side note, we did remove it in the fall, just prior to more spraying of the herbicide for water soldier. But with European frog bit in another system connected to Lake Simcoe, we left it in over winter because we knew it was not receiving any herbicide treatment.
Well, that's great. I love it. I love you doing the research. That's fantastic. Keep us posted. I mean, it's neat to hear that there's no guarantees it'll work for everything, but it's very positive. Getting good results.
And it's fairly manageable as well. I know that in the trench system where they had water soldier, they experimented with a shade mat cover that was just below the surface by about a foot or so, and that it had walls and the whole bit. And it was actually developed by a university student for their thesis, and it was very elaborate, maybe a little too over-engineered, and we took the exact opposite approach and wanted to make it as simple to create and deploy and maintain as possible. So putting it right over top of the plants, letting it sink to bottom. You could even use cinder blocks on all the corners, whatever, to simplify it even more than putting the chain through all the sides. But if anyone wants to try it, it's basically landscape fabric, black, very durable, fairly inexpensive, and simple to deploy.
Thank you, Will. That sounds great. I feel obligated to say, depending on where you are, what state you're in or whatever, if there is permitting involved, you should do the right thing. And
yeah, I must clarify that I'm with Natural Resources here, so not just a cottager going out and doing it on my own or anything.
Will, would you mind putting your email address in the chat box? There's only a few people left on the call here. Maybe they would want to get more information from you, and this is a really good way to exchange information since we have a small, intimate group here of Starry Stonewort aficionados on the line left. I will say that in New York, there are permitting restrictions, and I think Stephen Pearson's on the line still if he wanted to comment. That in New York you have to pull up the mats, and it's not likely that you would legally be able to keep the matting over winter, and there's spawning issues. So I know matting is not always good for control, especially for populations that have been in a lake for a number of years.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, Hillary, this is Stephen, and is exactly like you stated. There are some permitting issues with the different mat types for shading or benthic covering. So it's site dependent, and like you said, sometimes you must remove them annually, and other times you can leave them in place over time.
Yeah, great. I know with a call like this, it's hard to know that there's no one size fits all solution, because each of our states has a different restrictions. So knowing what we can and cannot do is important. So one of the questions is connection to climate change or salt levels.
What levels? What was it last?
Salt, like
Wow.
Magnesium chloride, sodium chloride.
I don't know. I mean, there's one of the conferences I just attended recently from the Midwest. There was interesting. The climate change thing is really fascinating because, and there's a lot unknown. So I guess we probably don't know yet in Starry Stonewort, but what is interesting is if, there's a lot of variables here. If let's say the water bodies all warm up uniformly, I'm just throwing that out there. And now, what does that do? Does that enhance some invasive species, or does it become an impact to them, a negative impact? And the same with natives. Does the natives grow faster and get more robust, and therefore maybe start creating a little more competition for invasives? These are all questions we're looking at, and there's actually people out there doing climate modeling to try and figure out the spread of ranges of invasives and native species. So I don't know the answer to that for Starry. Somebody's probably looking at it. And then same with salts. I don't know about salts. I know salts are a problem. They can be a problem for any number of different plant species, terrestrial and aquatic alike. I really don't know what the effects would be on Starry Stonewort.
Yeah, so the SLEEF paper that we discussed previously did take a look at pH and conductivity, not necessarily sodium chloride or magnesium chloride, and they showed a wider range of chemistry. So for the New York values in the lake systems, their pH lower range was 7.28 all the way up to 9.38. And then their conductivity in microsiemens per centimeter was 160 to almost 500. That is actually a larger range than what you would see in the St. Lawrence River system. And this was 2014 sampling. The paper is from 2015. I'll post the reference in the chat box for anyone who's interested in a more deeper dive for this paper. So Teresa Swenson has asked, can you speak a bit more on the success of mechanical harvesting for this species? And is fragmentation a significant issue or not a significant issue? And I think once Dave speaks, if we could ask Laura Bailey to provide a little bit of insight into the work that's being done on Seneca Lake in the Finger Lakes.
Yeah, I saw Laura's name here. I was going to pick on her myself, but you did anyway.
Hey guys.
Hey Laura. Harvesting, I'll just throw out and let Laura speak because she knows more about it. Harvesting I would say it's more of a control method to provide access. You know, you knock it down so you get your boat through without having props be fouled or the propellers, you know, causing massive fragmentation, spreading around more. I'm sure fragmentation is always an issue, but you know, you'd hope that the harvester would pick up a lot of it. I would say that, and Laura, correct me, but I would say that harvesting, as far as fragmentation is concerned, harvesting is a better thing to do than having a bunch of boat propellers chopping it up in the, you know, like a blender every time a boat goes through and spreading it all over.
Yeah, Dave, you know, covered our objectives pretty well there. Yeah, we're not doing mechanical harvesting with any hope that we're going to be able to eradicate starry stonewort by doing so. It's more so to, you know, reduce that upper biomass so that all of our boats that are going through that launch site aren't, you know, getting starry stonewort caught on props, propellers, and taking it farther down the creek or into the lake. So that's really our objective with the mechanical harvesting. And we did, the first year that they did mechanical harvesting, they had some people monitoring downstream to check and make sure that we weren't seeing a lot of fragments like floating down the creek. And they didn't find any, you know, fragments floating far away from the area of harvest. Starry stonewort, you know, its weight is largely water. So most of it was sinking right near the area where it was, you know, being harvested instead of floating away.
Thanks, Laura.
Yep.
And Laura, how many years have you been harvesting, and have you seen a decrease in population over that period of time?
It's been 4 years, and we haven't had the best, you know, measurement mechanisms in place. This year we started measuring the amount of biomass that we harvested and breaking that down between not just biomass itself that we harvested, but like the composition of species. So how much of that biomass was starry stonewort? How much was eelgrass? How much was Eurasian water milfoil? How much, you know, was another species, so that we can get a better idea of, you know, the impacts that we are having. If maybe we are reducing the biomass of starry stonewort, or maybe we're increasing the biomass of starry stonewort, and then, you know, what biomass overall are we reducing? So hopefully over the next few years, we'll have a better understanding of our impacts, but certainly we hope to at least, you know, prevent it from getting caught on as many boats. Because we saw this year, even before we did harvesting, the days that our Watercraft Stewards were there and collected data, we had over 200 boats that they removed starry stonewort from, that were leaving, you know, potentially leaving Seneca Lake with starry stonewort.
Wow. So even anecdotally, you're not comfortable saying it's, you know, plus, minus, or status quo?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely don't have the measurements to really make a good estimate. Like I think was mentioned earlier on the call, that the person that does the harvesting, you know, has seen some decreases, you know, over the years. And that certainly, you know, from the first year that we found starry stonewort and harvested to the second year, there was probably definitely a decrease. But I think it's kind of rebounded over the last few years to where it was initially.
Great, Teresa, hopefully that answers your question in regards to mechanical harvesting. Again, well, Dave's group will be looking at identifying and publishing best management practices. At this point, you know, it doesn't sound like there's long-term sustainable control methods that won't require consistent control year after year or year over year control. So those are some of the things that hopefully we can investigate and, find a suitable answer that won't require, bombing your lake every year to control this population.
If you have time, there again, the webinars we've recorded from last summer that are up on YouTube channel, which you can get through the website, most of those dealt with control. And so you've got experts talking about things they've tried and are testing with control. The one from Blake Cahill, it's not good news, but they tried looking at a combination of chemical treatment and harvesting, mechanical harvesting and things. So just, if you want to see what's being done out there as far as research, there's 4 good presentations out there that you can get to easy.
Wonderful. I believe that we've addressed all of the questions in the chat box. If I've missed a question, either unmute your mic and ask it or post it into the chat box. But I think at this point, we've had a great discussion about Starry Stonewort. So Barbara has indicated that, interestingly, over the years of harvesting, they've had a greater increase of Canadian waterweed rather than Starry Stonewort, going from about 70% Starry Stonewort down to 40% Starry Stonewort to about 50% Canadian waterweed. Bruce Gilman had indicated that in Canandaigua Lake, Starry Stonewort seems to be outcompeting our Eurasian water milfoil, which is completely dominant in our New York system. So maybe Starry Stonewort is acting differently in different lake systems. Certainly something that the Starry Stonewort Collaborative might be interested in pursuing. So thank you, everyone. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you all. I was just going to say there is no question that it acts differently in different lakes and different, what I'll call sub-regions across the Great Lakes Basin from talking with people. So just to throw that out there too, it's a tough thing to get our hands around.
Yeah, so for instance, some lakes have more deep Starry Stonewort because of substrate, and some are in the littoral area. So, hard thing to figure out. Thank you for everyone for participating in our Starry Stonewort Collaborative webinar today. We appreciate your time and consideration. And I'll throw up here a season's greeting. I hope that you all have a wonderful break, and we can reconvene back in January and start our wonderful work all over again. Appreciate all that you all do.
Thank you all for attending. This was great.